The following session was recorded live in St. Louis, Missouri for the 2001 Annual International Association of Square Dance Callers. This is tape number 16, Advanced and Challenge Choreo.
Alrighty, good morning. Welcome to the session on Advanced Choreography. To my right is Mike Jacobs from Flemington, New Jersey. I'll speak very slowly, and that should compensate on the time for the speed at which Michael normally tends to speak, and then we'll finish right on time. Right. Listen very quickly, because Michael has lots to share with us, as always, and it's always valuable. And I'll just jump in every so often, throw up a flare, and Michael will say, "Oh yeah, there's John." We often work together, and we have a good time doing it. We're very glad you got up this morning to join us. We appreciate it. Try to stay awake. Or if somebody's next to you nodding off, nudge them every so often, because it's not good for either Mike's or my ego when you do that to us. It does, and you will find that there will be a definite challenge flavor as we go. Is that a fair statement, would you say, Mike? If you had specific things, there will be lots of time for questions and answers as well, and we can address any particular topics. I suspect we'll have time there if you had questions or interests in certain challenge calls or particularly concepts that you want to talk about. Mike and I are certainly free on that. I know we will be getting into some T-bone material, things of that nature as well. So yes, it does say challenge in there. So yes, we are going to be doing that. See how that goes. If we're not getting where you want to go, feel free to tell us. Purpose of the tapes, the question was, were we also going to be addressing challenge material? And there will be some challenge material included in the session. If not challenge calls, actually, I think there will be challenge calls and certainly challenging formations, some of which we think can be shared with the advanced community very successfully, depending on how you present it, and others will be by name as well, because the panel is addressing challenge. It says so right in the title of the panel.
The first two issues that we're going to address, you should get this microphone back, John. The first two issues that we're going to be addressing are really something that apply across the board, whether you're doing advanced or any level of challenge. So.
Okay, that being said, let's go forward on some of the topics. We will again remind everyone, questions, comments, and so on that you're going to share do need to be shared from the microphone. Either one. Try mics based on how it's working. But we will get this on tape. A lot of positive responses to last year's session on the tape, and we'd like to share all of your thoughts with everybody out there that gets the tape. One of the areas we want to talk about is cueing in teaching with the dancers. And there's a significant difference between a cue and a definition. And not everybody necessarily tracks that. We all study our definitions, and lots of times we'll ask dancers to deal with the definition. If I sit here and I'm looking at, I happen to have the definition in front of me, and I'm looking here at swap around, front-facing couples. Bell in each couple walks straight forward without turning to take the spot of the dancer he was facing at the same time. The bow in each couple runs, passing behind his starting partner into the spot being vacated, ends as couples back-to-back. Now, for your next call, I would like you to do, certainly not a cue, a definition, pure and simple. And it's fine for dancers to read that if they're working and studying on their own. It's great. It's also excellent for us as a teaching tool. We need to understand the action. We need to understand what it does to the dancers, but it's certainly not a cue. A cue is going to be a cue, a prompt, an exercise to help the dancer get through a given call. We need to be able to do that, and we all develop some of our own cues, where we will hear another caller use a cue that is successful. I know that you will hear people call the call, for example, swap around as a cue. Some will say something as simple as point. Others will say things like girl walk, boy flip. Some will do it bow bell, which is particularly useful if they've learned bow bell. And of course, not too many years ago, we had removed bow bell, and we had also removed swap around from the A list and then put it back. So now we have both of those situations in place. But do you want to use bow bell as your cue? I personally would not always do that in the early stages of teaching that call, although I would have taught bow bell first. Now, some would take issue with that, and that's part of another part of the theory, I guess, that we would get into. I mostly want to, right now, focus on the difference between a cue and a definition. Cues are things that we're going to do to help the dancer get through the calls. And an important issue in that, and we had the same situation that occurs on many of the calls. Turn and deal is a good example. Turn and deal is a fairly lengthy definition about getting the dancers where they need to go. I'm not going to read it to you, but most of us know that definition, right? But we're not going to spout back the definition. But we will say things like right, right, left, left, or boy, right, girl, left, depending on how we've arranged the dancers to help the dancers get started in the right direction. Go ahead, Mike.
And particularly at these programs, at Advanced and Challenge, we tend to be far more highly technical. We tend to be much more purist in the approach. But I think sometimes we can be too purist, that we want to be always so technically corrected sometimes that what happens is we end up blocking the dancer's ability to learn. It ultimately, they're going to think of themselves as boys and girls more often than they're going to think of themselves as belles and bows. And so sometimes we bend over backwards so much to be technically correct that we actually block the learning process. And that's what sometimes we have to be aware of in the cues, that yes, go over there and turn around is not the technical definition of a call, but that's what the reality is for the dancer doing that particular part. And so they're looking to survive. I mean, it is wonderful to sit down and write the physics of throwing a football and where it goes and all the technical equations. But if you're the quarterback with a 300-pound lineman coming at you, you're interested in getting rid of the ball. And so it comes down to that kind of thinking process. Our dancers are not choreographers. They're survivalists, particularly by the time they've gotten to this point. And they want to know how to survive this call.
It's absolutely true. And we want the dancers to do win. We always want them to win. And we want them to understand. We want them to understand what they did, but to what degree. You know, they don't need to be analysts to the nth degree, and I think that's one of the mistakes that we sometimes make. Now, along that same process, the cues are important. They are a crutch. They are a learning crutch, and that's fine. They're training wheels. But we need to learn when to take the crutch away. When do you take the learning wheels away, the training wheels away from the kids? At some point, we need to learn to do that. At some point, they may always need to be there. If we give the dancers a very unusual formation or arrangement from which to do something that we know is difficult, we know they're going to have a hard time with it because we are choreographers. We do have a sense of what is difficult. We do know where they're going to tend to stumble or falter. Right? That's when we need a cueing help, helping words, things of that sort. That comes in at a given point in time. Let the dancers learn to dance for themselves at some point. Do you take it all away at once? No. But when we know that when they're in a right-handed two-face line and the call is turn and deal, at some given point in time, they really don't need to be told right anymore. You know, they're going to do this call reasonably well, and we need to get away from that. And I think there is a point of balance between the dancer who's dancing for himself successfully as being a true dancer, and then there's the dancer who is successful because he can dance purely to cues. And we have callers that are, quote, very successful callers because dancers are very flocked to this caller or that caller or another caller because they get through everything that caller calls. That caller also cues absolutely everything. He also almost does definitions to almost everything. You take the cues away and these people cannot function. You ask these people to dance in time to the music without cues, and they are no longer advanced dancers. And we are training people to function this way. You notice I didn't say dance. And I think that's a problem because we have a preponderance of over-cueing. But cueing is a great and important teaching tool that I feel we need to keep using as a teaching tool, but at some point we need to wean them away to let them dance. And you don't cue slide through constantly, or you don't cue right and left through constantly to the plus dancer after a period of time. Hopefully he knows how to do right and left through from relatively normal arrangements and formations. Somewhere along the line, yes, he might need help if it's a really weird place, unusual, unique place, but other than that, We expect them to do it. We need to have expectations of the advanced dancer as well.
The training wheel analogy that John used here is extremely important because, read it through all the way through. When you take the training wheel off the bicycle of a child, what happens the first time the child gets on the bike? They fall over and crash. Okay? Now, is the best way to handle it to go back and put the training wheels back on the bike? No. They have to learn to adjust to the fact the training wheel is no longer there. So when you do pull away the cue, you're going to have a disastrous result, no matter what. But eventually you start to see the progress towards actually functioning and learning how to do the call. And that's the next step, is to pull the training wheel away. Part of the problem we get into as you start to learn how to call a program, whether it's advanced or C1 or C2 and so forth, you're in the process of as you're learning, you're probably teaching a lesson group of that level. And so you're getting acclimated to it as they're getting acclimated to it. So in this first process, you're cueing because you're in the teaching environment. What happens is that because we practice the teaching environment much more than we've actually practiced calling the program, we continue with the cues. And we've fallen into a habit of cueing all the time because that's been the environment we came out of. But if we're ever going to take the training wheels off for the dancers, we need to take the training wheels off for the callers. And so the training wheel analogy that John uses here has a number of implications to think about all the way through. It's a really good example.
Yeah, that's a nice point. I hadn't thought of that, Mike, but it does carry forward to the callers as well. We become dependent on it. How did we get into follow your neighbor and spread? We've programmed the dancer. We've programmed ourselves, right? Do not spread has now become a call, right? We program the dancers. We programmed ourselves by overuse. Well, we program ourselves into cues, too. We program ourselves because we use the cue so much over and over and over again, it almost becomes part of the call is subconsciously to us, and we don't say one without saying the other. We don't say
There's a wrong call name on the plus list. It's not Trade the Wave, it's Take a Peek.
Right.
Is the name of the call.
Yeah. Tell everybody to do the second half of Trade the Wave. What's that? Well, you don't peek. Right? Didn't know you could fractionalize that call, really. I guess you can. Right. So these are things. Do you have more on cueing that you'd like to address?
Only from the point of view that I was teaching when I lived in Louisville a C3 lesson group. So, we have images of dancers at a certain point in time becoming extremely sophisticated and little computers that we program. They learn just like anybody else. They needed cues just like anybody else. I provided them on the theory that, once I've said this cue 27 times, they're going to be chanting it to themselves as this little mantra. What it was is that they waited until, on the 28th time, they waited till I was cueing it again. They never ever danced off of the name of the call. They danced off the cue I provided afterwards. And so when I finally took the cue away, when I finally figured that out, and that's why they couldn't really handle dancing C3, we had a long, disastrous night, but they started to finally learn C3 because they were finally responding to the call names and not to the cue that I kept providing. We always try to convince ourselves that, for some reason, just like I said, is that they'll start repeating that cue to themselves. The people that absolutely have to do that will always do that whether you provided the cue or not. And the 2/3 of the people that don't need that learn in a different way, in a different mechanism, will find the way to learn. Particularly people that have gotten to that point in their dancing careers, they have successfully learned how to learn calls. My gosh, you would think by the time they're starting to handle C1, they've got about a 300 or 400 call vocabulary in one way, shape, or form. So that, they know how to learn calls. It's actually concepts and thinking processes and problem solving that you really need to teach. And because that's a different attitude and different approach to things and not just call names.
I do find that we have a situation that when you begin to take the cue away, it's not that they don't have that cue implanted. I really do believe it's there. They've never called upon it because we provide it. See, they've not tried to use that part of their mind. They've never been asked to. And when we take the cue away, then they actually will suddenly start searching for it mentally. And it will come because we've effectively ingrained it. It's there. But we need to consciously, on our own part, take it away a little at a time. And can you take off one training wheel and not have a disaster? I don't know. We have a question down front.
Breeze Graham, Illinois. Do you still have to have helpful cues before the call? I find that some helpful cues just have to be given before the call.
Let me ask you, Breeze, are you talking about pre-queuing a given call, like now I'm going to do such and such, or don't forget you have to do so-and-so? Is that the kind of helping thing you're talking about? I look at that more as a helping word, as opposed to a cue. To me, a cue is actually part of the call, or some reminder of how the call would function, as opposed to, now remember, we're in a left-hand wave. That kind of thing is a helping word, and sometimes that is necessary. I was talking about being in unusual arrangements and formations. Sometimes it does help, and it's called for, and there's nothing wrong with that. We still want the dancers to win. I still think that's important. If you're trying to entertain, show them something unique. This is going to be a problem. The old theory, as they were commenting on at the dance last night in the 60s, is first we give them a shot, and then we'd walk it. Right? I'm not so sure that's always the best theory. If you think they have a really good shot at dancing it successfully and having a sense of what they did, I'm not convinced that it's a great thing for dancers to get through something and have no clue of what they've done and go on. I don't think it's terribly satisfying for the dancer. Other than this, I don't know what it was, but we sure did get it. I'm not sure that's a terribly satisfying feeling, as opposed to understanding what happened to them. So perhaps a hint, from an unusual position, I'll lapse to tally-ho, but some of the T-bone shaped tally-hos, if we cue one person might have an odd direction to go or not feel or have an intuitive sense, I need to go to the right, I might say, center boy, remember you're working right, everybody tally-ho. That's a helping word, to me, and the floor might be more successful in that everybody else was going in a relatively natural, normal progression of the call, but that one person those two people had a different direction to go.
I think a prime example maybe of what you may be talking about, we don't need to have to go into that intricate material. Left-hand two-face line turn-in deals, where they end up going back to back. I have found, and it's almost situational too, because if I'm calling in the A2 hall at the National Convention, then certainly I have expectation of lots of dancer problems because they come from a variety of sources. And I don't have much time to have them acclimate themselves to me. And the one strategy is, well, we avoid it all entirely, but then what we end up doing is downing our calling to the lowest common denominator in the hall. It's to some degree, these programs are based more upon calling to a standard and bringing dancers to it as opposed to dumbing it down. And so if I have an intricate problem, then, and at the same time I want some floor success, then obviously I need to kind of pre-cue warnings that this is not your grandfather's turn and deal. It's that kind of warning and situation. At the same time, you still run into the problem that you make them always dependent upon the pre-cue. So if it's my own club, then no, we need to crash and burn sometimes so we get off the training wheels. So I think it's a judgment call for the situation you're in.
And what would be the words you would use for that particular example, Mike, of the left-hand two-face line turn and deal? I know what I would tend to use. I would tend to say, watch your shoulders, or remember your shoulders. Something like that would be what I would tend to use, because just as a key, most dancers understand it's a right shoulder call. All right. Now, you're still going to have some that will flub, and you might follow that after the call is, since the centers are facing, or now that you're back to back, and then go on. These are helping words that take a long time to develop into your repertoire, especially if you're a newer, advanced caller. But helping words like that make all the difference. Watch the really good advanced and challenge callers work, and don't focus so much on the content of their choreography sometimes. Go to one of their dances and just focus on those kinds of things that they present. Those things are worth $1 million to you, let me tell you. And you'll tend to see why they're so successful. And you can carry that through to any program, not just Advanced and Challenge. Watch Jerry Story and Tony Oxidine work a floor sometime and watch the extra things they put in. Every once in a while, watch the little words or the helper aspects that they give them. Sometimes they spend a whole night building to get where they're going for the neat ideas. But other times, they'll just drop in a helping word here and there. It's true in all of our programs.
I tend probably more towards the general warning, like the row button Lost in Space, warning, warning, and that as opposed to being very specific about what you got to do to solve the problem. Because I still want them to try to solve it as opposed to me solving it for them. But at the same time, it's like a highlighter. I got to highlight that situation just so that it gets burned to their memory. Maybe we should be more careful here.
Okay. I think we're going to...
Yeah, I think we're actually segueing into the next section.
Next section. How does he say it? page 2. Right? Okay. Overs. What about the use of overs in our activity? Value, upside, downside. This is becoming an issue not only for callers but for dancers as well. Should we do the sequence over again? Now, I would preface this by saying that some folks that are pure and unadulterated sight callers may not necessarily have the eidetic memory that square dancing's answer to Total Recall here could do, where they can simply pull it right back up and duplicate having cited it, and now here it is, I'll give it to you again. An instant replay of exactly where everybody was in exactly the same position. If you're a pure sight caller and you can do that, more power to you. But most of us, can't do that exactly identical. You can get the idea back again, and that's good. But if you're working with written material or memorized material, you certainly can repeat the sequence verbatim. And if you have that approach, or you have Mike's skills, that you have that gift, you could also bring it back up exactly, and you repeat the sequence. I look at this two ways, because there's a concern on the part. Some dancers love it if they didn't get it the first time. And there's a value to that, because there's a certain upside to dancer satisfaction. As a dancer myself, I didn't get it, and I don't know why I didn't get it. It's one thing to dance through something and you didn't get it, and you say, "Oh, of course, I didn't do the roll, or I turned the wrong way here." And you can go on, and you don't need to see it again because you know why. But if you don't have a clue of what happened, what did I do wrong? It's very unsatisfying, and you'll see dancers worrying over that right into the next sequence. In fact, they'll miss the next sequence occasionally because they're so frustrated over what happened and questioning it. They're worrying about it. So in that case, seeing it again is very satisfying to that dancer. Now, of course, the downside is the successful squares. The successful squares move on, and they want to move on. They've had, they've seen that, done that, been there, It'd be just as soon not have to necessarily spend the time on it. So how do we deal with that? And how do we judge it? Of course, it is a judgment, and it's a matter of balance. And how do we approach it? I make a judgment call on a couple of things. I try to recognize, if I see a number of squares, a large proportion of the floor go down on a given idea, I will repeat it. I'll make that judgment call. I'm going to do it over again. Even if it's not verbatim, if I have it in a written sequence, of course I can do it verbatim. If I was sight calling, I'll take the idea and try to duplicate it as closely as possible, because I think the floor needs to see it, particularly if there was some good content there and a reason that I see that they missed it or something, and that they need to understand why this didn't happen in their square. Now, that could be a number of reasons of why. It might be because they simply weren't working together as a group, and they need to work on that, because working together is one of the key things, rather than saying, oh, each person did his part fine, but they didn't work together. That's important. They have to know how to do that at advanced, especially at all levels, but especially at the higher levels. So, yeah, let's look at that. Or if it was something very unique, I want them to see it. I want them to understand, how does this work? Then, yes, I'm going to make that judgment call. If it was something silly and they just missed it because, just a few squares missed it, and they missed it because somebody went the wrong way on a same-sex slide-through or something, I may not choose at that point to hold it up the whole floor and go over it again because one square or two squares didn't see it. That's a judgment call. If I want to do it again and I've got one or two really hot squares, they're just not missing anything. They're not going to miss much of anything I call that night. But a bunch of people missed it. I'm going to do it for the majority of the floor, and I'll simply tell the hot squares, okay, I'll just joke with them. I'll tell them, okay, you guys, fine, this time you guys go for style. Last time you went for content. Anything like that, because this lets the people that are getting it over again laugh, because, okay, they might have got it, but they didn't do it that well, and then we had a second shot, and they feel good about it. Comment made down says, yeah, let's see if you can do it twice in a row. And that's a good thing too. Anything you can kid with the floor about is good. But looking here, and this is not, by the way, overs is not a good reason to stretch your material. Right? No. Don't go there. It ties back to more cues second time around versus the first. That's an interesting debate too, going back to our first portion. Do you do more cues the first time to avoid doing overs, or do you give it to them the first time? If they have a problem, take the chance you're going to have to do an overs, and then the second time, do you give them more cues? Or do you say, okay, they're seeing it again, they have a better shot because it's their second try, so they actually now have even less need for the cue. I think that's going to be very dependent on what it was you were calling. You know.
I looked that there's two scenarios in which I do overs. One is if obviously I trash the entire floor, everybody's broke down. It calls for doing it over again.
You?
Moi. Secondly, it's my opportunity to teach. And John really kind of hit on that in so many references he made earlier. It is when dancers get through the stuff but have no understanding of why they got through it, it doesn't matter what my success rate was out on the floor. You can pretty much read that they went there because you made them go there, as opposed to understanding why they went there. And I think understanding why they went there is much more important for dancers that pursue these programs. They really want to know why they went there. And if you don't do it during the time period where you're on the microphone, you're going to do it 10 different times during the break. And so what I tend to do is look, is this my opportunity to teach? So when we get to the part that I feel like they didn't understand, then I go into an explanation of it. There are times where you'll watch squares as you're building towards this process that lose it for one reason or another. Screwing up is not an excuse for an over, as far as I'm concerned. That's the element of this game. That's how it's played here at Advanced in the C1. It being successful in every sequence is not within their expectation, shouldn't be within your expectation. But at the same time, you want them to understand what's going on, and it's much easier to teach 10 squares, 10 at a time, over a microphone, as opposed to one at a time, and you end up with a voice like this, from having done that during the break. Now, what happens is that I will do the overs and going through it. If I lose somebody during the explanation, I don't do it a third time. That's when I go down to their square during the break and try to really get one-on-one with whatever's going on there. And I find dancers very appreciative of that. I don't feel like they're feeling, at that point, the third time through, they don't feel like they're being soloed out and being embarrassed. They're really they're getting help. And when you look like you're giving help, they appreciate that aspect. So I think the call for overs is really an opportunity to teach and to explain and to really get situational with something. It isn't that you're going to go into whole general theory and do a whole complete workshop. It is that situation at that particular point in time that wasn't understood by the floor. So 50% of the floor may have gotten through what I've done, but I don't feel like they've understood why I've asked them to go to these places. And go ahead.
On that very issue, when I agree with Mike, when I use it as a teaching point, not only will we revisit that same idea, I will almost always do a slight variation on it too, because it reinforces their sense of having now gained a command of what we've been talking about in the process. And then I'll visit again during the night later on.
Many times, if I have expectations of a degree of difficulty on the sequence, I'm going to break down a majority of the floor. I save that for the second to last sequence, so that the last sequence is really the overs, so that more often than not, the majority of the floor, or the 100% of the floor, actually gets through the sequence, so we end on a successful note. We always have this idea that we want to end the tip on a successful note. What could be more successful than getting them through a complex idea, have everybody understand it, and all finish together on it? So I'll actually do the hardest sequence on the second to last sequence, do the overs, which brings everybody together. You still have felt challenged, and at the same time, you got to be successful. Lynn, and then Dick.
Speaking of overs, what's your thought on doing overs, like if you did it for the heads, when you do overs, do you do it for the sides, or do you do it for the heads again?
Dave Hodson was always an advocate of that, of doing, in other words, when you do overs, you reverse who you're doing it for. You do the sides and whatever. My problem with that is that you got different people in different situations, and the people that had the problem don't get a chance to go through it again. On the other hand, it takes the curse off, like John was talking about, for the dancer that got through it. They're at least looking at it from a different vantage point. So I think it's a judgment call. I prefer one. Hodson was very successful doing it the other way. So.
Do you make a difference between your workshops and dances on this?
That's a good question. Or festivals, or...
Yeah, I think you have to. I mean, if you're obviously calling for 50 squares at the National Convention in the A2 Hall, it's the overs has to be the right philosophy, and you shouldn't have gone that heavy into the positioning in the first place, because it's really hard to educate 50 squares at the same time without being in a workshop format. So, yeah, I think you got a different approach, but you got a different mindset of how you're calling. And certainly you're not going to go into your hardest material in one shot at the National Convention.
I'm not talking
Yeah.
I'm just talking about you're having a workshop or a dance.
Well, and I guess I have dances, and so I don't have workshops. Yeah, so
repeat the question for
okay, I'm sorry. Dave asked that, the difference between dances and workshops, and I guess I have always approached that there are lessons and there are dances, and I've never done workshops. I'll do workshops at dances as part of the format or whatever, but I think that once you leave lessons, there's a dance format, and it starts to raise the standard of expectation of success. You're in lessons, you learn something, and now you go to dances where you practice what you learned. And so workshops to me are something you do in the environment of the dance to clarify something or to get in a little more in depth in a particular position. But I don't have workshops per se that is different than a dance or a lesson. Okay.
I would speak to that also, though. Again, this is still your judgment call. It's still your dance. Workshop mode, they expect more workshop, I think, than in a dance. They want to be dancing all the way through. So let's go to that. Let's say, do you expect your dance to be as difficult as your workshop would be my question. My sense of it, my feel of it, is that a workshop usually goes deeper, perhaps, than a dance. So I may not have as much need for overs in a dance environment. I may not have as much need, and I may want to keep more dance movement and going on, and not give myself as great an opportunity to have the need for overs in a pure dance environment. I will relate a story that put me first and foremost having to address this question. Mike may well remember this. In my first year on National Dance and Challenge Convention staff, I was preparing to go into the C3 hall, where I was not terribly comfortable. And Mike was aware of this, as were a couple of the other callers on staff who I count as friends. And Mike came to me and he said, right before I went in, he said, "Now look," he said, "don't do call sequences over and over again when they don't get them." He said, "This is C3, these are big boys, you got to treat them like big boys, and don't keep doing lots and lots of overs, because one of the other callers on staff, that's all he does is overs and overs and overs." He says, "So don't be doing overs all the time." He says, "You'll do a lot better, they'll appreciate you more, just relax, do your thing and go on. They've got to step up to the plate and dance material." "Thanks, Mike, I really appreciate it." And Mike left. 2 minutes later, the other caller came to me. He says, "Now listen, whatever you do, make sure you do this stuff over for them, because they're not used to you. They're not going to do as well because they're not used to your style, and they really need to see your stuff because your stuff's really good. So make sure you give them a chance to do this stuff over when they don't get it. Good luck."
I found a lot of times the dancers are going to tell you want overs.
Got to be on the tape. You can make a comment. Come on up.
A lot of times, especially from a dancer standpoint, a lot of times you'll find the dancers are going to tell you they want overs.
But I don't think that's an excuse to do the over.
No.
It is, individual dancers have a problem. That's when I go to their square and talk with them there. And but that's why I'm a paid professional. It's my judgment call of whether the whole floor needs to approach this and not the one square. The one square can get my time on the break.
Yeah, at that moment in time, my decision was, appreciate it, guys, I'm going to make my own call on when I want to do an over and when I don't, because obviously I'm getting what I think both callers they're great callers in their own right, but I've got to make my own call on this because they're both giving me really good advice. And it's completely opposite, one from the other. I was like, now go into the Lion's Den, have a great time, But they meant well.
At some point, I think that the philosophy of never doing one is wrong, because you miss the opportunity of helping the dancer. The question is, at what point in time, how much help do you give, where is your teaching situation going to be? And so...
This brings up a really good point. I'm glad you mentioned it, because Mike was also doing something in a very kind way, because he didn't want to unglue me, because he knew I was nervous. Mike knew that my level of skill at that point in my development calling at that high a level was that I wasn't going to be able to be terribly helpful. I could simply repeat it back. But I didn't have a ton of helping words and cueing words. And, so simply just to parrot it back over again and watch them fail again wouldn't have helped me or them. And I would have come out the worse for it. But Mike wasn't about to say, since you're really not able to help them, you really shouldn't probably do these over again. So he's being kind all the way around and not even adding that into the story. But I'm not embarrassed to add that in because we all grow. And it's one of the things that I said to you earlier, if you're a newer caller, newer caller at a given program, one of the things that will help you is to gain experience and gather from more experienced callers these helping words and when do they cue and when don't they cue and when do they pre-cue, when do they help, how do they get the floor through. These are really valuable tools, and it takes a while to develop those tools. Shall we move on?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any, just right at this point, any other questions, comments about cueing or overs that we'd like to visit before we go on to another topic? Okay. Actually, the next area we're starting to get into is going to be some of the choreography aspects. It would be helpful if we could make a little space, perhaps, and probably put a square on the floor.
So would you like to move some chairs?
Yeah. I'll have a brief interlude, and we'll move some chairs around. Our next area we're going to talk about is a different approach, a little bit slightly different, interesting approach on the calls when we're dealing in advance as opposed to just putting calls together. One of the areas we're going to talk about is doing your part of a call. Do your part. And how do we piece some things together? Just a few choreographic ideas that Mike and I want to share with you, and then we're going to carry that a little bit further and a little bit deeper. Some of these require some different formations. Some require just some different arrangements for us to do. And we'll just put a couple of things together for you. And then Mike and I will weigh in back and forth on some of these, and then we're going to lead on from there. Let me talk you basically, some of the calls that we'll put together won't necessarily even have to be advanced calls. But the idea of saying, you do your part of this call while somebody else does your part of that call, these ideas can be a little more interesting, add a little flair to your dance. They become a little more puzzle-ish, if that's a word, for the dancer to deal with. So, are these things that you would necessarily work into a really smooth, ultra lovely, flowing singing call that you might have just gotten off of, he's here, I can't say that. Well, yeah, I can, I guess. One of these lovely new GMP things, I thought that was GPS for a while, but I was always global somewhere, But anyway, but they do add a little flavor. Let's ask the heads to pass out. Everybody touch a quarter, please. And decide which one I want to start with here in this situation. Switch the wave. Please don't hesitate like that. You make me really nervous when you do that. Okay.
It's early morning. We're still thinking about it.
Hadn't quite decided yet, huh? Okay. Centers, walk and dodge. Well, so far so good. I think we're in good shape now. If I had dancers in this type of a 3-in-1 line situation, I might do something interesting on doing your parts. For example, let's say we ask the boys to chase right while the girls do 2 split circulates. Let's do that. Boys do your part, chase right, girls do 2 split circulates. Not terribly, unique and different, but just a little bit of a flavor. Not something we've never ever done before, any of us. We've all done something similar to that. Switch the wave. And let's have the centers walk and dodge. Just keep setting it with similar fashion. But, how about if we bring the level up a tad, and I'm going to say it this way a little differently this time. I might even pre-cue this the first time I show it to the dancers. I might say, boys, we're going to ask you to do your part of 2 in-roll circulates while the girls chase right. Do that. Same idea. Has a different sound to it all of a sudden. It's now not split circulates, it's in-roll circulates, and we've just changed the program, right? We've gone up into advanced instead of the other. There's a variety of things we can do in that same vein. If we ask, do your part, girls linear cycle, boys recycle and sweep a quarter. Girls doing your part of a linear. All right, I need my two ladies to come down this side because you're doing your part. All right, it's okay. All right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and that's the key. You know, Mary's just asked, you know, if you're in the Bose position, do you do the Bose part? And hence the phrase, you know. Comment on the floor was overs. Absolutely. Absolutely a perfect place for overs if we're just showing the dancers do your part. Let's have everybody pass the ocean. Okay. Same spot. Sometimes we fall into these things. Sometimes we design it. Right? If I ask the girls doing your part of the call linear cycle.
From the position you're in, but not what the normal girl's part would be.
That's right. And see, that's what do your part.
All right,
do your part technically assumes that you are doing the call as if everyone got the call. Okay, and that's one of the things to really, you know, try to persuade the dancers. It's not, they've gotten used to you identifying girls and guys on stuff, and suddenly they start to assume things that way, and this is more, they gotta do their part. The other thing is that you guys are being wonderful little dancers. You need to screw John up here by reacting like real dancers do. Real dancers, when they're given it the way that John does, will, first people that get a call start to move. And you notice on some of his stuff, it looks really good because all the dancers are waiting for a call. But the reality we know on the floor is that the first group that gets a call are going to start going. And so sometimes you have to figure that in as to how you're going to deliver this. You know, whether you want to caution them of don't move till everybody gets a call, or if you want to chop how you deliver it, or whatever way you want to do to solve the problem. But you got to start to expect that the dancers are going to move differently than this group is doing.
Absolutely, and again, I'm treating it as this is a choreography session of interest for you guys, but Mike's absolutely right. You know, you're going to be showing this to the dancers, especially ones who've never seen it. You know, obviously they need to be taught how do you dance this kind of an idea. Let's do this again just so you can have a feel for it. Again, here's the same attitude. I'd like to see what happened. I want to see that I can do this. All right, so everyone do your part of the call. Girls, linear cycle. Boys, recycle and sweep a quarter. Okay. Good. Pass through, bend the line, pass the ocean, switch the wave, centers, walk and dodge. I'm working on this same idea. We're going to go into a little bit different stuff in just a moment, but if we worked from here, let's see if this is the one I really wanted to do most of all. We could. This one, let me ask just to, this might be more fun. Let's ask the girls to turn back. I would have set it up differently, but, you know, we'll do it for sake of time. If we had this, I might ask the boys to do their part of the chase right and the girls to do their part of trade the wave. I would always cue the boys first. Why? Get them out of the way, of course. But I would lead with it as a trade the wave action this time, and then we're going to follow it by saying, well, I'll show you. First off, all right, everybody do your part. Boys, go ahead, start your chase right. Girls, do your part, trade the wave. Okay, a little harder, right, but it works.
Now, if you've just given the dancers a big lecture on not moving until everybody got a call,
right,
you know, then don't do this next.
Right. Yeah. Switch the wave. Okay. Trade circulate. So they are mostly awake. Right. There you go. Nice adjustment. We appreciate it. Centers, walk and dodge. Okay. This time we'll do it differently. We'll say we're going to have the girls chase and the boys do your part mix. Everybody do your part. Girls chase right, boys mix. Same idea. But if I was showing it to an advanced floor, I would have showed the trade the wave first, and I would have done it for the same genders both times for the trade the wave and the same gender doing the mix. Give them that feel of what it feels like to doing their parts, so they'd have a greater sense of success on that. I want to go on just a couple more ideas, Mike, and then have you jump in, or you want to jump in now?
Yeah, well, just to point out that he's shown two approaches on doing this type of style. One is when he did the linear cycle and the recycle super quarter, in essence, they were all dancing the same dance action.
Right.
So he basically took two different sets of approaches to duplicating one dance action, and that's one methodology of doing do your part.
Right.
Okay. The other methodology is that he's doing two completely different calls, different dance actions that all fits into spots that agree with each other. And that's the other approach to take. Sometimes your starting formation is going to be really strange and bizarre, but because of the nature of the two calls, they blend together into the same set of spots.
Did everybody feel comfortable that Mike just talked about that?
Let me show you this one.
Good theory.
Explode and touch a quarter, and the girls roll.
Darn, that was my next one.
Oh. Nah, 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 nah. So watch here. I mean, we're going to do completely different sets of calls. We got columns for the fellas. We got lines for the girls. Do your part. Boys checkmate. Girls trade circulate.
This ends the front side of your cassette.
Bend the line. Touch a quarter, and the girls roll. Okay. Now, I'll take it a little bit differently. Instead of blending to the same spots, I'll take the other approach that we were just talking about. This time we'll say, do your part, boys transfer the column, girls Ferris wheel. Let the girls pass through. Swing through. Centers run. Bend the line. Touch a quarter and the boys roll. Now again, I would normally set it up so that we had the people who were going to come to the middle this time. In this case, it will be the boys. I would have normally, if I was just first introducing us to the dancers, let the girls come to the middle of the second go around, but we'll go forward with it. This time I'll say, do your part, and we'll let the boys do your part, girls do your part, track 2, boys do your part, mini busy. So the boys extend, center boy hinge, boys flip. To your left hand wave, guys. Okay. We have diamonds. So now we're ending up in a completely different type situation. Mike looks like he wants to say something.
Well, the only thing is that, remember, in order to get the setup normal for one set of people, for the girls, for the track 2, he made the boys setup much harder. They're not used to doing the mini busy from the left-hand two-face line.
Correct.
It results in the left-hand wave. And so, and your resulting setup is not as user-friendly because it's a facing diamond. So when you do these kind of things, you need to realize where you're, just because it ends at a diamond doesn't mean it's going to be a diamond they're comfortable with.
That's right. You know, the degree of difficulty can go up rather quickly. Alice, did you want to say something?
For a do your part, do you always tell the girls what to do first and then the boys, or the boys, the girls, or is it just each caller does his own thing? Or?
No, it's not each caller does his own thing. You need to look at what you're asking the dancers to do, and in the example we gave earlier about why did we move somebody first? Why did we move the boys first in that example? Because otherwise they would have been in the girls' way as they were coming to the spot. They would run into one another. Also, sometimes we cue it based on who has the furthest to go from a standpoint of timing, so that people have the furthest to go should be cued first, right?
Or the most to do.
Or the most to do. Sometimes it's the distance, sometimes it's the amount of activity that we're asking them to participate in, so that the call will time out as closely as possible to everyone finishing together.
But also on that last one you did, you had to cue the guys through their mini busy, so you wanted the girls to do their part because they could go and do it without having to be cued, and he had to save the mini busy so that he could cue.
There's only one good philosophy here, is what's going to lead to the best dancer success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Everybody, if you would please cut this diamond. Do the second half of Trade the Wave. Were you paying attention earlier?
Yeah.
No peeking. Yeah. Just trying to lighten things up, guys. We didn't see they were asleep earlier. All right. Do an in-roll circulate.
That was the review portion.
Yeah. Tell you, I worry about them sometimes. I really do. Okay, centers run, please. Wonder how I was going to do this. Let's have all the boys face right. Okay, good. Now, from here, I'm going to ask to do your part. Girls half tag, boys circulate. Ocean waves. Happens kind of quick. Okay. Do an in-roll circulate. Centers run. Boys face right. Do your part. Now, guys, you're in a column, yes? Or a box of 4? I would mention that to the dancers as I was leading into this. Right? Do your part. Girls, 1/2 crossover circulate. Boys walk and dodge. There you go. Okay. Much tougher. Much harder. I could have told the girls to do their part half tag again. right? I chose to up the level, up the ante, by changing the phrasing, right? Boys pass the ocean. Cut your diamond, please. Last parts for me, Mike, and then I'll turn and let you jump in. We have a question over here on the right.
Yeah.
Is saying do your part a judgment call, or is it required by any definition? And there's some calls when you don't have to say do your part at all, if you just want certain people to do it.
You have an example?
Well, such as ends of an ocean wave, if you want them to cast a shadow, and the centers do something else. You don't have to say ends do your part.
Actually, that's kind of probably one of the horniest ones here. Breeze asked about ends do your part to cast a shadow. That's a particular bugaboo with me. I want to give my colleagues an out when they've said ends do your part to cast a shadow. I don't think they've been specific enough, because I think if you're doing your part to cast a shadow, here's where you end. Boys, do your part to cast a shadow. So the lead boy back, cast 3/4, spread apart, and fellas, you got to be forward and back, like where ends of lines end up, and not way spread out on the outside, because that's where your part takes you. If everybody had done cast a shadow here, we'd end up in waves, lines, or whatever, but there's no gap or space in between the ends, okay, as far as forward and backwards. And I find a number of my colleagues end up, fellas, either if you're forward, take a step. If you're behind somebody, take a step back. Guys, spread back out where you wanted to be before. Butterfly, okay. Yeah. This is where you kind of want to end sometimes. But remember that the call ends normally. So your part takes you to normal end spots, which doesn't feel so normal because of where the girls are. Always go back to where your part actually takes you, which is, back up, Andy. Your part takes you there. Yeah. But girls, go ahead and do your center part of cast a shadow. So there's a clover around in the hook, and I realize they're in the way. But isn't this where we end if I had called cast a shadow from there? So that's where your part takes you. Yeah.
But saying to do your part, does that solve this?
I think it makes you much more specific. You at least have a defensible position, because if you do this kind of thing and leave it out there, you're going to have a 10-minute tip and an 8-minute rebuttal. Okay, they're going to come up to you on the break, and you're going to have to discuss and defend yourself. I'd rather take the break time as a break. So I want to find the terminology that makes it very specific as what I want, where people know to go. And to me, it's also playing fair with the dancers. Because, there's a game aspect to Dancing Advanced and Challenge. And so part of the game, since you control everything, you're the umpire, you're the referee, you're the coach, and everything else, and you're the opposing team up here, then you gotta at least play fair and play to the rules of the game so that they got a chance to win, legitimately.
For what it's worth, Mike and I are 100% in agreement on that. I do the same thing, and you will invariably get a question about that. Now, why do I end up here? You always will have to help the dancer. If you want the ending that both Mike and I agree to, you will have to help the dancers into that ending spot almost always if you're traveling around. Unless it's your home club where you've taught this.
Yeah, now, at the same time, for instance, some of the stuff John was doing, I'll be right just a second, John. In-roll circulate, everybody.
Hello.
Yeah, explode the wave. Jay hasn't danced a lot lately, so... Good. Boys chase right, girls crossover circulate. I probably can get away with doing it just like that without going into the long do your part. And there's nothing strange about the spots they're going to. And at the same time, if I think that the dancers that I'm calling to have never seen this kind of choreography before, then I probably try to do your part actually is a help cue at that point. But in the other situation, I think it needs to be specific, and it's clear what you want when you add that terminology. You always kind of walk a fine line between providing so much information that the idea is no longer a problem and has turned it into pablum, and you've really solved it all for them ahead of time, or being too vague and too nondescriptive, and as a result, nobody knows what you want. So it's walking the fine line between those two.
You can also grow into from do your part to how Mike just presented it. You can actually grow into that, and nobody's going to miss. But you didn't say do your part on that. I don't think you'd have a problem with that. Let's do this, if we could, cycle and wheel.
Which was do your part ages ago.
Yeah, it was when that first came along.
But it's developed itself into a colony.
Exactly. Swing through. Centers run. Good. Boys, do your part, bend the line. Whereas couples quarter in, or, however you'd like to get them there. Okay. From here, and this is just a variation I just wanted to share because I had not seen a lot of folks calling this. From here, if everyone would please do your part, a couple circulate. And of course, some people are saying, well, we're doing phantoms now. We've gone to C1, right? I don't feel the need to say phantom. Couples circulate from there. I don't feel that the dancers need to hear the word phantom. I feel very comfortable calling this an advanced. Most dancers do not have an issue with this. I'm going to ask everybody to do your part. Crossover circulate. All do your part, couples circulate. If you want to say do your part there, that's fine. All do your part, 1/2 crossover circulate. Good. It was very nice. Nobody tried to slide into the middle. Quite often you'll have dancers that try to crush it.
You guys are too good.
Yeah, you really are.
We need real people in here.
Yeah, you really are. Right. Yeah. All 8 peel and trail.
I take that back.
No. Well, I just thought we kind of up there. Now, the lead peels back. The trailer step forward. Make the right hand star in the middle. Star straight across to the opposite dancer. Good. We have crossing waves. We all feel good about that. Girls single wheel while the boys recycle. Girls pass in. Boys pass through. Right. Veer left.
Now, before we go on to, you saw that you did the girls single wheel while the boys recycle, I believe, is what. Okay, that is not do your part. Okay, because do your part. If you had the boys do their part, they would have worked out to either side and not in the middle with each other. So keep in mind that that's different than identifying one group of people to do a call. Do your part has got to be as if everybody was doing what you told them to do.
Wait a minute, Mike. I think we need to go back to
Can you set where you were up?
I think so. Everybody turn and deal. Do we have the girls in the middle?
No, it was the boys in the middle because they did the recycle.
Pass through?
Yeah.
Girls do a partner hinge, boys step to a wave. Did we not have that?
No, I think boys lock it, I think.
Well, boys can trade the wave for us while the girls are still chatting. All right.
No, I think you had the boys 90 degrees off of that. Was they?
Boys do a...
Yeah, they were?
Yeah.
Okay.
What were you thinking?
I was thinking it was the other way around. Boys lock it real quick. Okay. Now,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you see, from here, if, boys in the middle recycle, girls single wheel. Don't do that, right? We see the boys in the middle would recycle with each other and the girls single wheel. Except if I said do your part, the boys are now working with the girls' spots and not in the middle with each other.
Right.
So there's a danger of saying do your part all the time. Do your part has a very specific meaning, and you can put yourself in a trap you never meant to go to simply by throwing in extraneous words. All of these at Advanced and Challenge are dynamite. And you need to treat it with the respect you would give dynamite.
Boys, do a mix. Thank you, fellas. If I said working on each side, right? Do your part, right? Boys recycle, girls linear cycle. And we might ask the boys to sweep a quarter or something like that, whatever, just to affect it. But my point is just that you see what we were talking about. If we said do your part, that makes all the difference in the world as opposed to, that's what, again, just say.
And fellas, go back to where he just put you, okay? Do your part isn't always user-friendly.
Exactly.
Okay? Look where he's at, and technically probably that guy and a girl are standing on each other's shoulders.
Exactly,
and I'm not sure who's on the bottom.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah,
we don't have rules that cover the scenario.
Right.
So, do your part, even though, recycle and linear cycle together sound innocuous, but look at the trouble you can get into. So you need to be like the district attorney. When you're cross-examining a witness, you don't ask them a question you don't already know the answer to. Don't put two calls together and think they'll blend if you don't know that they don't already go to spots that you can recognize and deal with.
Yeah, you would have had to have the
sweep. Boys, go ahead and sweep back where you were.
Yeah, exactly. Veer left. We'll be out of this no time at all. All right. Boys as couples, face right. Good. I always hate that face right term. Okay. All right, everybody do your part. 1/2 crossover circulate. And that's it? Okay. You're in good shape. All right, have the boys run. Everybody half tag. Quarter through. Right and left grand. Been a long time, hasn't it? Okay. And at this point, I think we need to go to you.
Yeah, we're going to rush through T-bones here. Part of it, pick a spot. T-bones, yes, the concept is technically on the C1 list, but I think that the idea of the spots and the theory of T-bone can be effective use not only just at advanced but even at plus. And it goes back to the concept of doing your part. All the heads wheel through, veer left, crossover circulate, do a turn and deal, and the boys roll. Okay? Now, to set up this kind of T-bone, the people that rolled on the turn and deal have to be the original centers, whoever that may have been. It produces this kind of setup where everybody has the same identity into the box. We are all bells. See, if you reached over with your left hand, you would have somebody beside you that makes you a bell, okay? So, we're all bells in the box. We're all trailers in the box. We all have the same identity. And plus dancers can figure out, if I said everybody split circulate, they'd know where to go. Now, the temptation will be on a plus dancer's point of view and an advanced dancer's point of view many times is to try to make it feel good, to make it look like what they think a norm is. But a circulate at this spot doesn't really imply that you know all the T-bone theory and everything else. It just means you're functioning your part. Goes back to that. Everybody do your part, box circulate. Okay, or split circulate rather. Good. So, we can, and I could have easily just called that all 8 circulate as well. It wouldn't have mattered because it was the same action. Okay? Now, T-bone theory involves knowing whether you're in a column setup or in a wave or line setup. Boys have a wave or line orientation. Girls have a column type orientation. Fellows, quarter left. Okay, and you see the column that the girls can see. Fellas, unquarter left. Okay, girls quarter left, and they can see the boys' point of view, which is that they're wave oriented. Okay, girls unquarter left. So the thing is that this spot is much more demanding. It means that dancers know the T-bone theory, and I consider this C1. So I wouldn't do this with advanced dancers or plus dancers, but I certainly would have done the first part with them. Because it just, that position just demands that you know how to execute the call and no other special knowledge. Boys, trade, please. Good. Now, this type of T-bone box has leads and trailers in it, which means that you can do most calls that have lead and trailer definitions. Okay? So you could still then involve choreography at the advanced program, which it just dictates them knowing they're part of the call. For instance, everybody peel and trail. So girls are peeling right, boys are separate trailing right, and we ended diamonds. And you notice what they tried to do. They tried to make it feel good. They tried to make it look normal, and that's going to be the dancer reaction to the first time going through the spot. Is they're going to make it feel good as opposed to actually executing the rule of the call from that spot. However, you can know ahead of time and trust in that calls that normally will be executed from a box of 4 and end in a line or wave, when they're done T-boned, end up in a diamond. And the opposite is true. Is the calls that would normally end up in diamond end up in a box. Line rather. So you can trust then, if you apply a T-bone type call, that what is going to show up here. Everybody flip the diamond. Recycle. Veer left. Turn and deal, and the girls roll. Notice they were the original centers that set up that user-friendly box, okay? Boys on the diagonal pass through. All right. So here's our situation where we've got leaders and trailers in the box. Okay. Watch this. Plus call. Peel the top. So the boys peel left, girls left 3/4. Fellows, you have to move up as well. Puts it in diamonds as opposed to your user-friendly waves. Okay. I mean, they're all functioning. They're part of the call. It doesn't demand any more knowledge than knowing how to peel the top would normally be. Okay. But it certainly is demanding, and it's certainly very different. However, you as a sight caller can know ahead of time that diamond's got to show up. So that puts you ahead of them in the sighting game, as opposed to having to see what they do to figure out where they're going to land. Okay? Everybody flip the diamond. Notice we're title. That's it. Good. Explode the wave. All the girls quarter left. So, if in a normal box we did a half a split circulate, we'd end up in a diamond, right? The opposite's true when we're T-bone. Do half a split circulate. We end up in a tidal wave. Okay. Now I set it up so it was user friendly. By setting up another formation, it could have easily gone to left-hand waves as opposed to right-hand waves. Okay. Now they don't always have to be as demanding spots as this. Everybody explode the wave. Outside's partner trade, center slide through, and the center 4 touch a quarter. All the girls touch a quarter. This T-bone setup has the same handedness to the box. You notice that everybody's got a right hand to the box, which pretty much leaves you free to do most any box call, and people will land in the right in a spot that nobody else will crash into. So you can feel safe calling it. Each box walk and dodge. See? This will be more challenging. Each box of 4, chase right. Now, the fellas had the easy spot because they end up in the normal spot feeling good. Girls are one behind the other. If their bodies had been available, they would have grabbed right hands with them, but they weren't really. But the thing is that it's an available spot to be able to call chase right from and not feel that somebody's going to crash into the spot or anything else. And I didn't have to say do your part, for instance. Each box of 4 split counter rotate a quarter. Now, I'm being terribly redundant there. Each box of 4 covered it, split counter rotate covered it. I mean, I'm just trying to be helpful for dancers that are in strange spots. Okay? But notice that you can be free setting up the spot. All you have to do is check and make sure that all the hands into the box of 4 are the same. The girls have the right hands into the box of 4. Fellows have the right hand in the box of 4. If everybody's got a hand in there, the same hand, then you're okay to call the calls. Head girls do U-turn back. Okay, all 2 of them. Now, split counter rotate a quarter. Split counter rotate a quarter, and don't even try. My point is, let's go back to the box. I changed her handedness to the box by calling split counter. Oh, let's do this. Everybody walk and dodge. You can't. Okay, you got people go. Yeah, I mean, you can, he can, but when they get to the same spot, there's no rule that covers where they're going to. Okay, yeah, don't reinvent a rule. Go back. Okay, so the thing that I'm trying to show here is that if you kill in the box of 4, all the hands have got to be the same into it. If they're not, you can't do what I've been doing here. Head girls do another U-turn back, and see now we've got a user-friendly box that we can work any box of 4 call with. Everybody split circulate. Now, realize they've got to be sharp and recognize the spots and what they're doing. I mean, this dancer flipped over correctly, but if she wanted to make it feel like what the boy setup was, she might have done it like a partner tag, and you'd end up in trouble. So you have to be aware of what the dancer's interpretation will be of these spots unless they're sure of what they're doing and sure of call rules. At the same time, that's judicious use of T-bones in advance. When it enters challenges where you really need to be able to differentiate between columns and lines. Okay. Boys in the middle counter rotate a quarter. Everybody trade and roll. Good. Pass the ocean. Quarter through. Switch the wave. Turn and deal on the boys roll. Good. So here's one of our user-friendly boxes. All 8 circulate. Same action as call and split circulate from there. So, boys trade. You want to hit?
Okay. I was going to point out from here. Now, here's a situation where we could have, Mike was earlier showing you the peel and trail. We can up the ante slightly if we had everybody trail off from here. Now, we're still going to yield the less than as friendly diamond, but it's a little bit harder because we're asking the girls, in this case, are going to be trailing. The leader's going to be trailing left, coming across instead of peeling away, which is what is more natural. They're used to peel and trail, for one thing. We call it more often. And they're feeling a little bit less likely because they're working toward the boy. It's a little tighter in the middle, especially when the square's so jammed. But we can still do that. Everybody trailing off. Another application for trail off instead of just from the completed double pass through or just the right hand or left hand column. So everyone trail off. Girls to your left, boys using the right hand. Yeah, a little tight for you don't have a lot of space to work with. Make sure where's the trail, guys? You see it again.
And you see dancer expectation of where it's going to be as opposed to the rules interpreting where it actually ends up being.
Exactly. They had to do the actual trade. They tried to stop short, right? And it gives us this diamond situation. I think we need to resolve that and allow time.
Yes. Yeah. We're eating into your break time right now.
Yeah.
if you want to grab John or I about discussing more about the T-bones or the do your part or whatever, feel free to grab us during the course of the convention. I hope you enjoyed it this morning.
Let's thank our square.
Yes, very much so.
Thank you very much. Thank you, folks. Any last-minute questions you would like to share, comments, whatever?
Good job, you.
Thank you, folks. Have a lovely break. Have a lovely convention. We appreciate it.
I'm a student of both of you guys.
Thank you, Jay.
Is there any decisions on Motivate from the double pass-through? That was up for grabs.
That's gone. No, they haven't met yet.
Do you call that?
No, not at all.
No.
Good. The reason is because I feel that the right hand rule, which is what covers the circulate, is very specific.
We're working together.
It's kind of two people go to the same spot. One person actually owns the spot, the other person is thrown outwards. My problem is that this has really changed the type of matrix. Some of the centers have become hands and vice versa. True circulation to the same spot doesn't do that. And so, like, if I'm in a diamond system, there's a two-phase line in the middle, and I call diamond circulate. Two people go to one spot. One has moved out further than the other one, but they both have gone to the outside. Neither of them have magically become centers.
Great job.
And a double pass thing where they don't crash into the waves. Two of the centers have become ends, and two of the ends have become centers. And circulate spots change identity like that.
Yeah, you can do that.
And so,
It's the changing of the identity. That's the problem. In other words, on a double pass, you just simply can't say all 8 circulate.
And you get the other formation to show up and expect that to function.
Because it's identity.
Yeah, I have a problem with all that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's my interpretation of it. There's other things that go that. There's a liberal interpretation that uses, going to all 8 circuits, all kinds of spots, it's fine. I don't believe that. But that's kind of my.
Is the definitive word on that still up in the air?
Yes, I would say at this point.
Okay.
Until he closes the divinity and goes on from there.
Okay.
So, my friend, when you're coming down my area, why don't you send me an email what you want me to get these people prepared for, so I can, at least you walk in and make your job easier, too.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily doing that my job gets easier, because then I just have to up the ante to something else that I feel like that I'm giving a different viewpoint.
You wind up the ante with it. I got little old May. She gets lost real quick, but
I mean, I thought they danced fine. I mean, the people I've seen, both the time you were at the dance, the one year before, and this year, I thought they danced well. So I have no problem with how they danced.
If the two of you come down together, you're always welcome to stay at our house.
Well, thank you.
Just so you know that. That way I can pick your brain all night.
Okay, I thought you said it, Jake.
Maybe you were thinking.
Yeah, we've had dancers do that for us, haven't we?
Yeah.
They're good dancers. That's just a good one.
Like a one-man band there in San Antonio.